Welcome to Trinity Radio with Dr. Braxton Hunter and Professor Jonathan Pritchett.
We got Dr. Braxton Hunter, pretty talented and well-known apologist, shared the stage with the William Lane Craigs to the Mike Laconas to all those guys. Jonathan Pritchett, Dr. Pritchett is here, and he is a New Testament guy, does a lot of stuff, a lot of podcasts, a lot of debates, so on and so forth.
You can go out of this room tonight and be a Christian apologist. Now, it may not be that you're able to give the answers, but you can be immediately when we're done here tonight, you can be an answer finder for people.
Greetings and welcome to another edition of Trinity Radio. I'm Jonathan Pritchett, and along with me is
Braxton Hunter,
the victorious Braxton Hunter. Today we're going to talk about the debate. Stick with us.
This is the first word.
I've got to do a segment, but I just can't. I'm sorry. Look, I'm just tired, okay? It's been months of preparing for this debate and this conference, and I like Matt, but I've heard, Matt, if you hear this, I've heard this voice. I've heard your voice more than I've heard my wife's. I'm just tired of it. I just want to watch a movie or something, just Netflix. Not that I'm buzz marketing for Netflix. I can't do this segment. That's all I've got. That's it.
And now, today's topic.
So
it's not heresy.
It's Harrison.
Wow! They gave us nothing but tradition and no argument. All they did was get on this stage, yell real loud, and set a straw man on fire.
Okay, now I was not impressed. I've never heard of this gentleman before, but.
And welcome back to the main show. And Jonathan, there was the duel of Dade County back when I debated Joe Myra. Then there was the battle at Baltimore.
Yeah.
I don't know what we're going to call this, the war at Waco or something. But yeah, just back from Baylor University and Truett Seminary in Waco, Texas, from a debate with the Matt Dillahunty.
Yes, and they have taken to calling you Braxton the Dillahunter.
Well, I'm not going to encourage that, but
I am going to encourage that. That's not going away.
Yeah,
in fact, that's what we're titling our episode, and we're going to Photoshop your face on Conan the Barbarian.
Well, now that you said it, somebody's going to do it.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. Let me say this right from the beginning. This is my disclaimer about this entire episode. I have been listening to a lot of Matt Dillahunty for a while now, and I have come to really like him as a person.
Sure.
I do believe that he and the atheist experience is not good for Christianity, obviously, and of course I'm sure they're happy about that. But I came to like him as a person, kind of in the way that a lot of Christians liked Christopher Hitchens. You know, that his rhetoric and the way that he talked and carried himself, he was enjoyable to listen to and a funny guy. And Matt's that way. And so, as a person, just as a fellow man. You know, somebody wise, John Calvin, I think, once said something about that when you're looking at any other human being, there ought to be a reverence because that's a person made in the image of God.
Yeah.
And that goes for Zachariades, that goes for Matt Dillahunty, that goes for everybody. And so but beyond that, I came to really like him. And right before the debate, you know, I think it's okay to share this. I said something to him like, well, I've seen the atheist experience, and I've seen how you're different in debates, but I don't know which Matt I'm going to get today. Is this going to be WWE or something? You know? And he said no, and he said, you know, I don't even worry about who wins and loses and that sort of thing. I want to have a real discussion.
Well, that's good because he lost.
Well, I admire that. By the way, for those of you atheists who may be listening to the show, and perhaps Matt, if you're listening, this show is very much I'm the straight man and he's the snarky, curmudgeonly professor. So
no, yeah, but no. In these debates, sometimes there's no clear winner, and sometimes there's clear winners and losers. And let me tell you why I think that you won, and why I agreed with you in your post debate interview with Leighton Flowers that not only could nobody say that you lost, but there's no real way anyone could say that he won because you presented arguments and evidence from the data, and I want to talk about that point. And like Christopher Hitchens, Matt Dillahunty has a very charming and smooth way of saying "nuh-uh" in 1,000 words, but it all reduces down to no, nuh-uh, I don't know, and you don't know either. But it's all there was no positive construction really, other than well, we don't really have a good enough tool like science to do history and investigate the supernatural and whatever else.
Yeah.
Which is actually the same tool that you use to investigate those things is the same tool that he used to make the claim.
Right.
We don't have so it's like, well, I mean, kind of a self-defeating argument there. But,
yeah. So first, I would like to start this by talking about, and I did this actually in the second debate interview we did at the conference. I want to talk first about what I think Matt did well. I know that's shocking for me to start that way, but I do. I don't want people.
I could say a lot of things that he did well.
Yeah. So let's
anyone who can say "nuh-uh" in more than 1,000 words. Man, you are. Let me tell you, an incredible sophist.
Let me tell you what I think he did well. So first of all, I think what he did well was he knows his audience. So if you watch an episode of The Atheist Experience, there's a lot of profanity, there's a lot of hanging up on people. And actually, I got a little bit of an insight on why he burns through a lot of those people as quickly as he does, is because they take anyone who calls and they give preferential treatment to theists. So if you're a theist and you call, they're going to answer you before maybe some of the atheists. And so I believe him when he says this. He's trying to burn through, the person who calls doesn't know anything, to try and see if he can get a real apologist or somebody who knows an argument. So I appreciate that. But anyway, he's very aggressive on The Atheist Experience.
Right, and I like that.
Well, you would.
Right. But see, here's the thing. I like that, and it was kind of like and because we've kind of monitored some of his debates, he can be like that in some of the debates.
Yeah.
But he wasn't in yours, which means, oh, I got to be nice too.
Well, the side Tim Brigancate is the only example of a debate where I think the Christian that I've heard of his debates, where I think the Christian got uncool.
Yeah, well, you and I have talked about that debate.
I personally think the unpopular opinion here.
Right,
I think Cy won.
Yeah, I think Cy lost big time. Here's what I'll say. I thought that his opening troll of Matt Dillahunty was brilliant. Not for a debate, but it was brilliant. It was entertaining to watch.
Sure.
But the problem is I don't think he ever went anywhere with it. And
well, this is not the review of the side debate, but I do want to say this about the side debate is my biggest problem with, and I'm not a presuppositionalist apologist like Cy is, but my biggest problem with that, and I want all of you who are skeptics who are listening to this to hear me say this, is it's not his approach that bothered me. What bothered me was when during the Q&A, and even Matt may have asked him some questions like, what about slavery? What about genocide in the Old Testament? What about these kind of things? And he would just say, yeah, I don't answer those questions for non-believers. I don't do Bible studies with non-believers. You want to become a believer, then we can talk about it. Listen, I feel like our job is to give answers.
Right.
And if we have answers, we should give them.
I have an open invitation to any non-Christian who wants to come to any Bible study I host.
Praise the Lord.
Happy to do that.
And we'll answer all your tough questions.
Yeah.
If we can.
Yeah.
And we can.
Yeah, and it just we do have answers. You may not like them because of your sensibility, but that's irrelevant.
So anyway, back to what I think Matt did well. So what I think he did well was he knows his audience, and he's a different Matt in debate than he is on the Atheist Experience most of the time, and especially when he knows that there's a Christian crowd. Now, this is not me trying to psychoanalyze him. He's said this in videos that what he does when he is before a primarily Christian audience is that he wants to come off as non-threatening, as someone who's approachable, someone who's a friend, and kind of show people that atheists don't suck the blood of children.
Right.
That atheists can be nice people. And we've said that from a human perspective. We think we're all sinners, but from a human perspective, atheists pay their taxes, they're nice to their kids, they love their kids.
But here's a thing that works in his favor. It's the same reason why that you and I are just, whenever we do hire faculty, we always look for, do they have pastoral experience? because you know how sometimes we've talked about in the past, people with pastoral experience typically are better professors than those without. I mean, sorry.
Yeah.
But because he was, it's like Penn Jillette, because he has a magician's background. You know, he actually has kind of the equivalent in that world of being an entertainer. And I don't mean that in
and he was training to be a pastor.
Yeah, and that. I don't mean entertainer in a negative thing. I love entertainers. Yeah. But what I'm saying is he takes those skills, like you would take a pastoral set of skills, and brings it into this arena, and it's lethal.
So
you know, because you can become likable, you know how to play to an audience, and if you know, and he does, and if you're familiar with the arguments enough to talk about it in an intelligent way, that's a lethal combination. That makes him dangerous. It's the same with Hitchens.
Yeah.
You know.
So he did that, and you know, let's go ahead and start talking about opening statements, and I'll lead by talking about his opening statements, because what I want to, even though mine came first, what I want to say is that's where what he did well, he did the best, which is, I'm going to give you my personal testimony of deconversion in a way that will hopefully be palatable to Southern Baptists sitting in the crowd who are older people, you know. And so he did that. Now, what's interesting is we had 20 minutes of opening statements, and I don't know how long he went doing the personal testimony thing, but just me thinking, I haven't timed it, but me thinking back on it, it had to be most of it. And then but then he brought, this is the other thing he did well, he brought an argument, not framed as an argument, but he brought an argument that is, I think, the second best argument that atheists can bring. That doesn't mean that I think it can't be answered. I tried to answer it in the debate and think I did. But I think if you're an atheist and you're trying to make a case, there's two good arguments you got. I think those are the only two good arguments you got. The problem of evil,
the probabilistic,
that's the best.
The probabilistic.
The evidential probabilistic argument from evil is the best that atheists can do, in my opinion. And then the divine hiddenness thing. Yeah. And the reason is because even Christians know what it's like, and those things are tied together a little bit. He didn't bring a problem of evil, but those two things, because everyone knows what it's like to go through loss, to experience loss or something, or wonder in a bad business situation, God, where are you in the midst of this, right? So there's something intuitive about it. But the divine hiddenness thing, and I actually checked that in my rebuttal, but we're not to my rebuttal yet. But I thought that was a good move to bring that argument. Now,
you didn't use my line.
What's your line?
When he said, why doesn't Jesus show up? My line was, well, he has people for that.
Yeah, he has people for that. I'm his people.
Right, I'm one of his people.
Just like you're not Satan, but maybe you're working for him. No. But here's the thing.
Yes.
I thought those were. I don't know why he didn't bring more of a constructive case. Now, this is just Matt Dillahunty's way. Is he deconstructs, but he doesn't construct his own
But he also
case.
doesn't believe that he has to.
Yeah, his position is, and this is a change. Now, I have heard this from multiple people afterwards, and this is a common thing that has resulted from atheism over the past several years, which is, I'm not, back in the day, even back in the early 2000s, when William Lane Craig or somebody would debate some atheist professor, it was clean cut and understandable, because Craig was taking the position that, yes, the Christian God exists, and the professor was taking the position, no, he does not exist.
Yeah, but this is not the old Bertrand Russell way of doing things, where respectfully I disagree. Yeah. Christianity has some useful ideas, but here's why they're all wrong.
Right. So and this is a classical debate structure. What you do is, does the Christian God exist? Affirmative, negative. What you have with Matt, and I haven't said this on any other interview things, is I know he's not interested in winning and losing.
Good, save a little for the
for our own show. but I know that he doesn't see it this way. And it's not about winning and losing, but in terms of convincing people, if the debate question is, does God exist? And I'm saying I'm trying to get in the camera. I'm saying over here, yes, and over here is no, but you're not here. You're here on the pivot point, and you're saying, I don't know. Then guess what? If this over here gets one solid thing in its favor, then it goes that way in audience perception. And I think, and we're beyond talking now about what I think Matt did well, but I think overall in the debate, and I didn't say this on any other interviews because I hadn't listened to it yet. Now, I don't have the video, but I've heard it because it was recorded audio of it, and it's not released yet. But what I hope comes out is that what they heard, what the audience heard, was a lot of Matt saying, yeah, I don't know, but I don't think you can either. I don't know, but I don't think you can either. No, that doesn't convince me. That doesn't convince me. And then me on the other side, and I don't mean to sound arrogant because I know I'm talking about myself, and I hope I don't come off that way, but me kind of eager to answer every question that could come. So even when he would make a statement that wasn't a question and the clock ran out when he's supposed to be questioning me, I would be like, what? Can I answer that? Because that was supposed to be a quick, I want to answer that, you know? Whereas I think typically in a debate, the idea is, I said that and boom, now you don't have a response. It was, no, I want to answer that. I'm excited. Maybe I can help clear that up for you. So I hope that they saw one guy saying, I don't know a lot and neither do you, which I understand Matt's position on all that. And then one guy saying, no, it's not that I think I'm so great because I know. Let me tell you why I think I know, you know? So anyway, let's go through this thing. What did you think about my opening statements?
Well, I love the free will argument.
Be critical if you want to.
No, I usually, well, you know, it's kind of inevitable always.
Yeah, you'll say so. Yeah.
No, but I really liked, well, number one, you have a really good cadence. So
I was told I spoke too fast.
Well, okay.
But that's from people who don't listen to audio on double speed like you're supposed to.
Right. I didn't think that you spoke too fast. I thought you were clear. I thought that you had a good cadence. You kind of sounded like the happy warrior there to, you know, a little bit of that Tennessee folksy thing comes out through you when you speak. Yeah. Well, if you say so.
I'm from Tennessee.
Yeah, I know. But I really liked the free will argument because it's one thing to read what you wrote, what you prepared for. It's one thing to hear you drone on endlessly in my office about it. But to hear it presented is a different thing, right, than just hashing it out. And I thought that it presented way better than I thought it would because we were worried that it was going to be too technical or that we were worried that it was going to be too
and it may have been
esoteric. But because of your delivery, I think that it works as a good, solid argument. It was not something that we've heard a million times. Mm-hmm. And I understand if it ain't broke, don't fix it, go to the Kalam.
Yeah.
But what I liked about your, throughout the rest of the debate on the Kalam is that you didn't say the Guth-Wellington model, blah, blah, blah. Like, you know, I'm glad you stayed away from that because philosophy does matter. I know everyone says theology matters. Well, theology matters because philosophy exists. You can only have theology because of philosophy. But so philosophy matters. And you were right to say later on in the debate, well, I know we'll get to that, but well, who cares if I'm a physicist, not a physicist?
Right. The science side of it.
Right. Irrelevant.
Even Craig says, who's the modern champion of the Kalam, he says the best answers are the philosophical answers. The sciencey answers are just window dressing.
I've made this point before.
Not window dressing, but
I've made this point before. Number one, theists need to stop poo-pooing philosophy. But number two, atheist philosophers owe a huge debt of gratitude to the resurgence of Christian philosophy for keeping philosophy at all relevant.
Yeah.
Because atheist philosophers were just ready to bow down at the altar of science and say, yeah, we're as irrelevant as Stephen Hawking and Lawrence Krauss say we are. And then Christian philosophers said,
yeah.
No, we have to keep these people in check because now they're like, forget falsification, forget all this other stuff. We're just going to make it up because we have math.
Right.
You know, and they're like, no, until you bring us dirt from another multiverse, shut up. You know, that kind of thing. So it's really good that, when I see philosophy championed from a Christian perspective, but I'm also even happy when atheists start to kick back against the goads on that as well. Yeah. And they owe a debt of gratitude to Christians for that.
Well,
because philosophy does matter. And again, theology, what we do, is actually impossible. That's why Aquinas said it's the handmaiden of theology, because you can't do it without it.
That's right.
So I really liked that part of you doing the Kalam, because you didn't try to sell so much the cosmological argument from cosmology itself, or from physics. Philosophically speaking, this has to be science supports it. You know, there is science that supports it, but let's talk about why objections to it don't matter. So that was good. And then I thought your resurrection case, which was the bulk of the because you
had a full 10 minutes.
Yeah, you had to divide 10. Yeah, 20 minutes. You divided 10 minutes between the free will argument and the kalam, and then you had a full 10 minutes on the resurrection itself. And I thought, again, it might be because I'm biased, I love you more than most people on planet Earth, so I'm going to be somewhat biased. But again, the delivery, I thought that you gave a better presentation for the resurrection than any I've ever heard from any apologist ever.
Well, that's high praise.
Because it had the same amount of scholarship in it that the others have. But again, I go back to this annoying Tennessee demeanor that you have. Yeah. It is annoying because, number one, I don't have it. You
have an Arkansas demeanor.
Right. Well, I get up there and grunt and scowl and everything. No. Yeah, we have our own way in Arkansas, I know. You're lucky we wear shoes to the debate.
I'm married
right?
to an Arkansasian.
It's me too. From the same town as my wife, Springdale. But I think because you're such a good presenter of that I thought it was probably the best 10-minute opening statement debate presentation of the case for the resurrection that I've heard. And I love Mike Laconin. I love William Lane Craig. I'm sorry you can't do it like Braxton can. That was because by that point in the opening statement, you had kicked into high gear already from getting the rest.
Yeah.
Diffuse the audience with a joke, get into your arguments, and then by that point, you've hit your stride.
Yeah.
And for me, I thought that was the best 10 minutes on the resurrection of any debate ever.
Let me tell you,
go watch that when it comes out, just to see William Lane Craig could learn something from that one.
Oh my gosh. Well, here's the thing. I want to say on the free will argument. You can listen to the Bible Bro Down episode to hear me kind of go through that tier by tier and what I said. But I will say this that I didn't say there, which is because it's a new argument, the concept is not new. C.S. Lewis said things like this. People have said things about free will and God before. But because structuring it like an argument for God's existence and not just throwing it in as a cumulative data, in a cumulative case apologetics approach, because of that's somewhat new, I'm a little bit sensitive or self-conscious about that argument. And so I have arguments on arguments to support each premise. You'll notice if you watch the debate that in the rebuttals, he pressed me, or I don't think he wanted to talk about free will, but I pressed him to talk about it. And when I did, he challenged me, primarily on premise 2. And I had 3 arguments, sub-arguments, ready that could be their own, one of them a deductive argument, ready to support that premise. So if you're out there and you're thinking, well, I can think of a way that I could shoot that down, you might. But it's unlikely that in the past 8 months, really I've had this argument for about 2 years, it's unlikely I haven't thought of it and don't have something to say about it.
Yeah.
And so, I thought about, well, I could just kind of explain all that in this episode, but then I decided, no, I may use this again in debate.
Now, in the aftermath of this debate, from those who've just heard about it, people are still waiting to see it as of the time of this video recording. Some have heard it live, some have heard you hash it out with them before, but there's a part of Christendom now that's the part of the little apologetics junkies that are super excited about this, and they're glad that you just threw it out there in a big major debate. It's like, we're not a this is. I think this is the apologist going to be like, it's our time to own it, because within Christendom itself, not necessarily apologetics arena, compatibilists have been out there running their mouths, confusing this issue. No offense, Tyrio ban, all that. But within Christian circles, and people are so excited about this because they can talk about it outside of that context and say, yeah, we're Christians and Christians for 2,000 years in the East, and still streams in the non-Augustinian West. People who don't,
have a firm libertarian freedom,
right, for 2,000 years.
But here's the thing:
this is a Christian view, and we think that it's an evidence for God's existence, because, like you say in the argument, it's if libertarian freedom does exist, if God's the best explanation for that, because So where can you get it?
But see, here's the thing, and
there's not a pixie out there that can give it to you,
right? And here's
unless you're Matt Dillahunty's pixie,
universe creating pixies. Right. But see, here's the thing: I have actually. It's not even been a week as of this recording. This is on a Wednesday, and it was Friday that it was the debate. It's not even been a week, and I have already had at least 2 Calvinists say to me, that I'm a Calvinist, but I would. endorse that argument.
Right.
And here's why, and I do think I said this in other things, but it needs to be said. First of all, the argument doesn't go in reverse. The claim is if God does not exist, libertarian freedom does not exist. The claim is not that if libertarian freedom doesn't exist, then God doesn't exist. That's not the claim, right?
Right.
So I could make this
but
argument.
Like I said before the show, I might do some work on that to challenge you on that. But
right, but here's the thing this is what I've been using.
Well, my complaint for that was that, what was I say? I said if you're already a determinist, an atheist could just assume, say, well, you don't need God for that because the cosmos takes care of why determinism.
Yeah, but
is true.
soterioban and everything else.
Yeah.
So here's the thing. I've used this as a analogy of the argument to tell my Calvinist friends why it is that I think they can endorse this argument and even use it. Well, yeah, maybe even use it as a defeater, as a philosophical defeater.
Well, some Calvinists do use the Plantinga free will defense as a defeater, as a philosophical defeater for the logical problem of evil, just because that's just the way math works, you know.
Right. Even if I personally think libertarian freedom doesn't exist, the Calvinists could say I could be wrong
because
and
it's
a
logically
defeater.
possible as a defeater. Now,
but hold on, let me give my counter analogy. So here's an argument: if God does not exist, then talking bullfrogs don't exist. Talking bullfrogs do exist, therefore God exists. All right, now, I don't believe in the existence of talking bullfrogs. I don't think they have the vocal cords necessary and the genes necessary and all those kind of things. But if someone used that argument, I wouldn't have a problem with it. I wouldn't get bothered about it. You know why? Because if we ever do discover talking bullfrogs, guess what? God's the best explanation for their existence, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know why. That's all I want to say about that. I don't know why.
Well, most Calvinists have been receptive to it. Now, I do want to remind my Calvinist friends, though, that John Feinberg in The Many Faces of Evil thinks it's fundamentally dishonest for you to use arguments like that or the free will defense because he says we don't believe it.
I don't think it's
even
dishonest.
He said, well, I'm just telling you what Feinberg says in The Many Faces of Evil, and he says in so many words that you shouldn't use that if you don't believe it.
I don't think it's dishonest
I agree
if you
with
preface
Feinberg.
it with, I could be wrong about my understanding of determinism. I could be wrong about freedom. And maybe we do have libertarian freedom. And if that's even remotely possible, then it would overcome your argument. It's a defeater. With a philosophical defeater, you don't have to know it to be the case. It's just as long as it is possible.
Right, but Feinberg would say, number one, you're either spreading false ideas by putting them out there as a live option, or you lack conviction for your own beliefs. Either way, it's not good.
I'll tell you.
That's you don't have to. If you're a Calvinist, you don't have to agree with John Feinberg, but I do.
Well, let me tell you some things I think Calvinists would like.
I think he's right about that.
Is after the debate, there was a young lady who came up to me, and she said, I can't be a Christian because I'm a determinist, or something like that. And she said, I'm a determinist. Oh, no, she said, how do you get over the problem of evil? And so I gave the free will answer. And she said, but I don't believe in free will. And I may be remembering this wrong if she listens, but I thought it was something like, I can't be a Christian because I don't believe in free will. And I offered that we do have determinists who are Christians. So even though I'm not a Calvinist, a Christian who affirms determinism, the fact, there's a whole lot more with Calvinism, obviously, but the fact is, I'd rather her be a Calvinist and be a Christian than be, believe in free will and be an atheist. I'd rather her be on our team. So I don't care if that's what it takes. I'm not going to tell her that I believe it's true because I don't.
Yeah.
But if you're convinced of determinism, guess what? There is a brand of Christianity that affirms determinism, and I think those people are going to heaven.
Yes, they are. And like them, you have a belief you cannot rationally affirm, which was one of your points in the free will argument, is that, without
Well, there actually is a whole set of things, and I'm not ever going to do this video, but there's a whole set of things that would change features of the argument slightly if we're talking about God. And of course that argument couldn't even be used, but things that I said, like the rationality, the morality, all these kind of things, it has to be nuanced if you're going to talk about Calvinism. And soterioban, but y'all got to give us a pass because I brought a free will argument. Of course, Calvinism and the interplay there.
Well, because Calvinists talked to you about it.
Yeah, you guys brought it up. It's not
well,
my fault.
And I think it's the interest factor because it's not, I think it's a treat when William Lane Craig deviates from script and talks about abstract objects as existence of God or something,
or mathematics,
or,
brings an ontological,
right? You like, something that's not
something new, And it wasn't too long ago, just a few weeks ago, Kevin Kevlar Henderson was saying, when is an apologist going to bring something different, you know?
Yeah.
And I was thinking in my head, I wanted to type it, but I was like, well, let's just wait and see. But now Matt asked me on the Bible Brodown, how did I think it went? And it remains to be seen. I think it's got something really strong going for it, because despite what my atheist friends want to say, most of the people out there, normal people, just that you're working with or going to school with, who just don't believe, but they're not like dogmatic. They're not like watching the atheist experience and stuff. Most people, if you tell them what Daniel Dennett says, basically you're a moist robot, you know, they know that is absurd, right? Of course, my decisions are libertarianly free, even if they don't know that terminology. And then when you plug in the morality aspect of it, because that's the cool thing. He didn't take the bait, but I wondered if he would think I was bringing the standard objective morality thing. But what I was arguing was, if you don't have libertarian freedom, despite the ongoing debates between Christians and atheists about whether and how you can have objective moral values and duties with or without God, that's not what I'm doing. I don't think you can, but even if you do, it's a moot point, because if you become a sex offender or if you become a philanthropist, it's all determined and you could not have done otherwise. And Matt knows this because he said things before, like in the Eric Hernandez debate, that, well, we still can hold you responsible. We can, and sure, that's true. That's what Dennett says in his book, Elbow Room. We can incarcerate these people. We can reward people, but you cannot hold them ultimately praiseworthy or blameworthy because they were determined.
Yeah.
Right?
And that doesn't, see, people forget. Okay. So, people forget the history of ideas because nobody reads great books anymore, which they should. But you know, it's like Solomon said, "There's nothing new under the sun." These ideas, like, okay, so scientists, you have data about scientists and atheist philosophers who are shoehorned into the idea that determinism is. This is the way it is, right? What was the percentage of the philosophers?
Yeah, so I had all this data. Yeah. Man, the thing is, you prepare so much and then so little of it gets brought up in the debate. But if he had pressed me on, well, the majority of philosophers, well, first of all, if he had pressed me with, neuroscientists, they all know now that, and he did mention Libet experiments, not by name, and I said, oh yeah, Libet experiments, I'm happy to talk about that, and then he left it alone. But
because he didn't want to talk about it.
Well, but the thing is,
he's heard the name,
yeah.
And
we ought to do a whole show on Libet experiments and experiments.
I always get this impression that sometimes you put something out there, like a feeler,
to see how it goes.
To see it, and then you're like, I'm staying away from that because he might know more about this than me.
Could be. Yeah. I don't know that, so I had this whole thing about neuroscience. There was a major landmark study that came out last year of all of the neuroscience findings that had to do with free will and determinism for several decades, including Libet experiments. And what the conclusions that were drawn was that the conclusions in those studies were, whether they were in favor of free will or determinism, were biased in almost every case, and the conclusions were not based directly on the findings.
Right.
And so it basically means, hey, win one for skeptics. If you're skeptical about this issue, guess what? The neuroscience doesn't help you one way or the other. And then on the what you were asking was, I also had the data on, and I'm going to probably get this wrong, and I don't have it in front of me, but it's close. 74% of the philosophers that were polled by a study that was put out, and then it was in Scientific America, was 74% said, no. 58% were compatibilists of these philosophers and graduate students in philosophy. 58% were compatibilists. I forget how many were hard determinists. It wasn't a huge number. And I think it was something like 17%, and it could have been less, could have been more, affirmed libertarian freedom of these philosophers. Here's the thing. That particular study, 74% of the philosophers that answered the questions were atheists, and a huge chunk were naturalists. Yeah. So but then another study said that the majority of the general population is libertarian freedom,
right,
which includes some atheists and stuff.
Right.
So here's what we learned from that. We basically learned premise one of my free will argument is backed up by it, because what it means is if you're an atheist, you tend to be a determinist, and if you're the general population, you tend to be
right, which is what I'm going
freedom.
to say. Because and there's a cultural history to this when philosophers surrendered philosophy to the deference of science, and this is in the last 60 to 100 years. They tend to take, if they've worked, Alex Rosenberg being I think William Lane Craig rightly recommended his book as kind of the pinnacle of this is the world if he's right, and you should, and then he, in the debate, he debunked all of it, but he's like, this is the world, own it, right? And you see that they own this world they claim methodological naturalism, but they all are essentially hiding the fact that they're metaphysical naturalists, because they really are. Whether they talk about, well, we don't use that in our work, blah, blah, bogus. We all have, our biases and presuppositions. But as that has happened, you get more groupthink, like scientists and stuff. But over the last, I want to say even 150 years, but even less than that, especially in the last 50 or 60 years, what you have is you have over specialization, where people aren't generalists anymore. They haven't read the history of ideas, so they get locked into their specializations and they cannot think outside of it, and so they get locked into these ideas. And I think that determinism is one of those ideas that a lot of atheist philosophers and scientists have locked into, because they don't see how their worldview can account for anything else, and they ignore everything else.
Right.
And so I think it's good that somebody is bringing a challenge to that in and of itself. And I think your argument is a vehicle to challenge that and say, like you pointed out, yeah, okay, well, guess what these people also believe about the world, which leads them to this.
Yeah.
No surprise there.
Yeah.
But what is surprising is that at 74%, so 26% were not atheists, right? 58%.
No. 74% or whatever were atheists.
Right, which means 26% of the people
were not.
Were not.
Yeah.
But they only got 58% on compatibilism, but it got 17%. So what that tells me is that some of the non-atheists, which they could have been Muslims or whatever, that's a difference of 9% of the non-atheists were also some form of compatibilist.
But again, the numbers are generally correct, but I don't have it in front of me, but it's easily accessible. But the thing, so there's the free will argument. Let's move that off the table.
Yeah.
I know that people want to hear about that. In fact, the next day I did 2 interviews on it in front of a crowd, and that's like all people wanted to talk about was the free will argument in one of the interviews.
Right, because we've heard all the other stuff.
Yeah. Well, don't go off on it again.
Well, it sounds awful to say the resurrection's old hat.
No, because I want to say something about the resurrection.
No, I know. I say, and nobody should act that. Well, the resurrection. Yeah, we've heard that before. Don't be that way, because the resurrection's the most important
That's everything.
thing. Right.
But so then the Kalam cosmological argument.
Now this I'll go ahead and say, who cares?
The thing I want to say about that was it pairs so well with the free will argument.
Yeah.
Because later in the debate, and I'll just go ahead and say this now, later in the debate, he challenged me on how do you know it's an agent, okay? So we worked through all the Kalam, we worked through all the things, how do you know it's spaceless, timeless, non-material, all that. When we got to agent, he presses me on, well, how do you know it's an agent? And I said 3 things. I said, first of all, because these other things that would qualify as spaceless, timeless, non-material don't have causal powers. And then I said, but that's not the end of the story. Also, you have different kinds of causation. You have event causation, like if I think I said if I threw my water bottle at Leighton and it knocked the microphone out of his hand, that's an event that caused another event. You have state, which is like a frozen pond with a log resting on top of the state of the frozen pond is the state of the thing. But what we'd have here is state event causation, and do you know what explains that? An agent. And he was like, well, that's just because that's the only thing that you can answer. And we were running out of time, and I was like, no, it's not. And I was like, and then lastly, it had to have libertarian freedom.
Yeah.
Why does the first cause of the physical universe have to have libertarian freedom? Because there was no prior determinism to lead to that event. You had nothingness, which has no properties, no powers, no potentialities, no possibilities. So it has to have libertarian freedom. And what has libertarian freedom? Agents do.
Now, yeah, but I hear Paul Helm in the back of my mind saying, nuh-uh. just as much as Matt Dillahunty, and I know Soterio Band.
Well, make the case for him.
Huh?
You be Paul Helm.
Well, he would say, well, he's determined by his nature.
Yeah.
So he didn't have and this is I've seen Matt Slick do it. I've seen James White do it, and Matt Slick did it in his conversation with Leighton. James White did it in his conversation with Michael Brown. Could God have created a different cosmos than the one he did?
They say no.
Either no or I don't know. That's an interesting question. I no.
Because he's okay, but see, here's
because
the
he
thing.
could have only created this one.
What people don't understand. And
what Paul Helm, the esteemed philosopher of Christianity,
Yeah.
does not understand.
Right.
Is that what you're saying?
If he's raising this
No,
criticism,
I mean James White and
I don't care.
And Matt Slick.
This is where me and Matt
count,
Dillahunty are the same.
yeah.
I don't care how many letters are after your name. If you're
Right.
wrong, you're wrong. And here's the thing.
How many letters are after? No, I'm just kidding.
Here's the thing. So
you can say that because of how many?
because
letters
I do
you
have letters
Right.
after my name. But here's the thing. But you don't have to have letters after your name to say that. It's still true. But here's the thing. People think that libertarian freedom only means is that you have to have what's called the PAP, the principle of alternative possibilities.
Yeah.
That I could have done otherwise. That when I just did this, I could have done otherwise. And that came up in the debate because I do think we have that in most cases. That is a sufficient but not necessary condition for libertarian freedom. Even if you don't have the principle of alternative possibilities. So let's just grant Paul Helm that, okay, and I'm not granting this, but that God couldn't have done otherwise than whatever he did in every situation because God is bound by his nature to always do only the best thing. Okay, let's just say something like that.
Or always whatever thing.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't know. They don't. I don't know.
Well, however they want to say it,
Right.
that there's ever one thing he can do.
Yeah.
Okay, here's the thing. Libertarian freedom just says, a mere libertarian freedom would say that you are the originator of your actions and that nothing outside of yourself determines you to do whatever.
Well, they
thing
would
you
agree
did.
with that, but they would say that he couldn't do.
And I'm saying that's what's required for libertarian freedom.
So they're
but on
they're just failing
compatibilism-
on definition.
Yeah,
then.
because I've heard people say when I say that, oh, well, that's just compatibilism. You just don't understand. No, I understand perfectly well. On compatibilism, there is something outside of you that is determining you. The past history of the universe, your life experiences,
Right.
your neural structure, all these kind of things are leading into determining you to have the desires that you have that then result in the
Right.
actions that you take. So yes, there is something, but with God, even if there was never anything else that he could have or would have done, he was the originator of his actions and nothing external to God determined him. So yes, God rightly has libertarian freedom.
But to be fair, the sophisticated Calvinists, most Calvinists you meet will believe that God has libertarian free will, and he could have created any number of different universes, but decided to create this one among all the possibilities. Whereas in most, higher intellectual Calvinism, they'll grant that God, in his natural knowledge, had all the possibilities that he could do, but he could never have chosen anything other than the one that he did because he's determined by his nature to maximize his glory. There's a lot of hidden assumptions in why they hold to compatibilism about God, which I think are silly, to put it mildly. That's why people say, when are you going to debate a Calvinist again? When are you going to debate a Calvinist again? Well, Calvinists don't want the philosophy debate. They want to argue another debate about Ephesians 1 or John 6 or whatever. And I'm after something else. I'm after the thing that they ran from Teddy and Sonny about. Give me a meaningful difference between compatibility.
Well, we've broken the Soterio ban for sure now.
Right.
But
what I'm saying,
we made it 4 episodes.
Right, but it's in service to this
the
topic,
argument.
right?
Yeah.
Because there are objections to it. There are objections that Matt Dillahunty could bring a theist objection to it as a defeater, if he so chose. Because I was surprised in the debate what he didn't do was use. The question was, does the Christian God exist? If he had just argued for Islam and Allah, he could have won the debate.
So now here's where we get to the resurrection. First of all, what I wanted to say was that the Kalam, I was able to tie it back to freedom, and we actually had one other person say that was how those two arguments worked so well together.
Yeah.
If he had challenged me on premise 1 of the free will argument, basically I'm saying God's the best explanation for free will. One of the things I would have said, so there's 3 things I would have said about that. One is that if God does not exist, then the universe is just a natural system of cause and effect.
Yeah.
And even Daniel Dennett, who's one of the guys that Matt Dillahunty appeals to a lot, Daniel Dennett said that the best explanation, naturalistic obviously, that he's come up with for libertarian free will, or that he's heard anyone say, is basically that there's multiverse, and our brains are like quantum multiverse navigators that move us in and out of different realities. And my impression from reading Dennett was that he thought that was absurd. But that was the best thing. That was the best thing anybody could do. So God's the best explanation. And here's the thing. Also, I was going to say, even if you came up with some quantum weird explanation that did work like that, now all you've done is explain how God did it. Because God, there's a teleology, a design to libertarian freedom. 100%. I know this is old hat to you, but they haven't heard it yet. So 100% of the benefits that are afforded to us by libertarian freedom are important for relationship building. Love, morality, rational affirmations, and pure altruism. Pure altruism is important, and we can go into that on another episode. But so there's a design to it. Now, I don't know that libertarian freedom is necessary for evolution. So if someone wanted to say, well, maybe we just got it all because evolution. Right. I don't know that you need that for survival, but you do need it for the kinds of relationships that the Bible describes.
Yeah.
And so,
well, evolution can't produce anything that can be causal outside of the natural world anyway.
Right.
Unless you're a theistic evolution, so which brings you back to God. So,
yeah.
or
your mind is reducible to your brain chemistry, which is reducible to biology. So, it's dominoes all the way back.
All the way back.
Okay, so now the resurrection. The thing I did different here, and it's not different. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say the resurrection brings us back to the debate question: does the Christian God exist?
Oh, and he challenged me. He acted like, sorry, Matt, but he acted like, well, you brought arguments at least a little bit that could be used by other religions, and that's inappropriate. No, this is how classical apologists work. We show that God exists so that when we come to the resurrection, that we have an agent who could do something like a resurrection. And this is key. Matt said some things about the resurrection case, but not much and nothing substantive. Sorry. And here's the thing. If the debate question is, does the Christian God exist? And I spend a full half of my opening statements doing resurrection case, and you don't respond to it, that is called a tacit concession in a debate, and that is damning for your position.
Well, he did throw out there as an aside that, well, if somebody had their head chopped off and then he saw them again with their head reattached, he couldn't conclude that a God did it. He would just conclude that, wow, we have something interesting here.
Right. Now, someone might wonder why didn't I respond to some of that stuff, and it's because the way the debate was structured, after he did his rebuttal, which was the first time he interacted with my arguments, after that, my rebuttal had already gone. We were going into cross-X. Yeah. So I couldn't respond, freely to that.
But I was saying, so what? That's my thing.
What I would have said is,
if I'm debating you, and the debate question is, does the Christian God exist? I have a pantheon of other gods that I could pull from, and I would tie you up for the 2-hour debate refuting every other religion.
Yeah. And tactically. Yeah. And I'll give him credit here. He was trying to have a real conversation because tactically, he didn't even have to worry about my theistic arguments. He could have only focused on the resurrection, and if he could knock down our reason to believe in the resurrection, then guess what? We can't affirm that the Christian God exists.
And he said something about...
But it's been the whole night on the theistic arguments, partly because I was pressing him.
Yeah, and we had people with their heads cut off, and then we had a couple of other things, but that was it. And I was like...
Oh, and I don't care what scholars say.
And I don't care what... So that's your trash can lids and aliens that he was complaining about Lycona, is we get decapitated people and reattached, and he didn't know what to make of it.
Which does go back to Lycona.
Right. So you have a guy who was decapitated, and you see him again with his head reattached, and you don't know what to make of it. That's your argument.
So he was helping me there.
Yeah.
Whether he realized it, because my case was, against him, was, number one, Matt tries... I don't think he's necessarily trying to do this, but the way he frames it is, it sounds like, if you don't convince me, then you lose, right? So then I'm trying to point out, Matt has an unrealistic and somewhat fanciful level of skepticism.
Except he doesn't have that in his everyday life.
He doesn't do that with biological evolution. Right. He doesn't do that with, is this chair going to hold me? But here's the thing.
I don't know. He may have problems getting out of bed in the morning. I don't want to speak for him. But he does. So his level of skepticism on anything else is
right. So,
and I think he said you can't have too much skepticism.
Yeah. Now I want to say something about this, but
Yeah.
first let me finish my point. So, if you just agreed with me that if someone parted an ocean in Jesus' name, you wouldn't believe. If it was written on the moon, you wouldn't believe. And now you actually took what I said and said, yeah, and I'll give you some more. If someone's head got cut off and then it reattached without human involvement and they resurrected, I wouldn't believe. You're making my case for me that your level of skepticism is unrealistic and fanciful. And I was trying to tell the people in the audience, if you're an atheist out there and you think that would be some pretty darn good evidence, then Matt's opinions about good and bad evidence should have no hold on you. Right. And so that's all that. But now, what did you just say?
About you can never have too much skepticism.
Okay. He has always says this David Hume thing where I want to believe as many true things and as few false things as possible. Okay. Now, I'm not the first to say this. But yes, I agree with him. The question is, in trying to accomplish that and knowing you're never going to do it perfectly, where do you lean? And he leans skepticism, skepticism, even though he doesn't think so. But here's the thing. The reason for that, so you could believe, if you believed everything anyone ever said in life, you would believe all the true things, but you'd also believe a lot of false things. Right. If you were skeptical, if you disbelieved everything anyone ever said to you, you would avoid all the false things, but you'd also avoid all the true things. So what you want to do is, he's right, you want to be in the middle somewhere, trying to come up with a way to get as many true and as few false. But you're going to lean one direction or the other, and he leans skeptical because only thing I can get is because that seems safer, because it's dangerous to believe false things. What I want him to realize, and all of the atheist listeners to realize, is it is just as dangerous to disbelieve a lot of true things. Right? If you disbelieve that smoking causes cancer, that is incredibly dangerous. Well, I'm just skeptical about that. Well, okay, be skeptical and die of cancer. That's what's going to happen. Yeah. You know, you cannot do. I'm sorry, I know you've got a family history of that, but I'm just saying that's. I
agree with you. My dad would agree with you.
Yeah, your dad would be like, "Darn right, son." Yeah. So the thing about it is dangerous, and so why? You know, just do the Anthony Flew thing. Follow the evidence wherever it leads. Right. And guess what? You don't have to have certainty to have knowledge. Right. And I think he would agree, but he needs to own up to that and live his life that way. It doesn't have to be
derived from science to count as knowledge.
That's right.
And I mean,
or any methodological naturalism.
Right. To count as knowledge. And even that claim itself is self-defeating, because you're using other means, namely philosophy, to arrive at that conclusion that science is the only thing that can give you knowledge. And it never dawns on people that their argument is self-defeating, because, once again, they haven't read books, they're no longer generalists, they're locked into their specialization, and they can't think outside that box. And the problem is when people want to popularize those ideas, which is what Dillahunty does. I'm not saying he's not well-read. He's well-read, but he is locked into a mindset of one aspect of the conversation without, understanding the pillars that prop up that worldview. That once you kick them all out, there's nothing holding it up, and that's why you can go in there and tear somebody up and I don't mean, I'm not just trying to be facetious, like, oh, you smacked him in the face or whatever. I'm just saying you did, in a very congenial way, dismantle his entire case, because he didn't bring much of one, and what he didn't understand that there's nothing to support it underneath, because that whole worldview has already kicked out all the pillars.
Well, one of the things he always says that he said in this debate is, if there's a God, he should know what would convince me. I don't know what would convince me, but he should know, and he should give it to me. And what I was trying to point out to him is, Matt, if you're telling all of us here openly that you wouldn't believe if a man came back from the dead after his head was severed right in front of you, you wouldn't believe if someone parted an entire ocean. We're not talking about the sea. We're talking about an ocean, in Jesus' name. If it was written on the moon, then have you considered the possibility that you have constructed an epistemology in which there just simply is no such evidence that would convince you?
I mean, Jesus himself, he said, if they're not going to believe Moses, they're going to believe somebody who rose from the dead. Yeah. If you're already there...
Yeah. And he's like, are you telling me that your God can't make me believe? I'm like, no. He could take away your libertarian freedom and force you to believe. But short of that, no, it may be that there's nothing. And then I said something, this is my Tennessee folksy way, my evangelist coming out. I was like, well, but I don't believe that, Matt. I think some stuff would convince you. And I'm hoping that tonight we got an old organ sitting over here and we could have an altar call and you can come to Jesus. So that'd be
one of the
awesome.
things that he's confused in two different directions on belief and faith. Because faith, biblical faith is not the Mark Twain believing what you know ain't so, right? And then he's like, on the other hand, so he's got that problem. And then he says you can't choose your beliefs. Like,
I wished I'd gotten to address
right,
that.
because he's like, okay, no, they can't rationally choose stupid beliefs, but they can choose their beliefs.
Well, and
you can believe that this is a pink wall instead of whatever cream color it is. This is not rational. But the idea that people can't choose their beliefs is nuts because people do it all the time.
Yeah, and here's the thing. It's really just a misunderstanding of, where the thinking is on this.
Right.
In terms of, because here's the thing. Is it true? Actually, I'm going to go real deep here. It's actually not even true that you can't decide to believe anything. So, for example, I can decide to believe, this is a very small room, I could decide to believe there's an elephant in this room right now.
Yeah.
I could choose to believe that. The problem is I can't deliver even to myself on that belief, but I can still choose to believe it. Now, that's a very subtle point, and people go, well, yeah, but so what? Okay, fine. I'm just saying that's not even technically right. But secondly, this is called indirect.
It's just showing that the statement is nonsense, is what you're doing.
Yeah, but this is called indirect doxastic voluntarism, and what it is you can choose your beliefs by putting yourself in a position, freely choosing to put yourself in a position where the belief arises naturally. Tim Stratton gives a great example of this. I think that. So I think he's got a stepson or something. I could be wrong. I'm sorry, Tim, if I am. But so well, you had that situation. I'll just use you. But this is Tim's analogy. So
and we love Tim, so we're going to steal all his best stuff.
Yeah. But I'm giving him credit. So your son Zach.
Yeah.
Is not your biological son, right?
Right.
Is this okay to talk about?
Yeah.
Okay. So when you first met him, it may
his name is Zach Seiler. he's a works for the government.
He's awesome.
His name is not Zach Pritchett. Everyone knows that he's my stepson.
Yeah. So whenever you first met him, it may be that you just had this automatic like I love him and he's my son deal.
Yeah.
But for most people, that doesn't happen immediately. Right. Can you choose to have those feelings about him? Yes. You know how you do it? You put yourself in situations where that feeling will arise naturally by hanging out with him, going to special stuff where he's playing a baseball game or whatever, listening to his mother tell stories about him, and you develop and you have your own experiences and you develop those feelings of relationship. And the same thing can happen with beliefs. We do it all the time. We choose what to study. We choose how far to chase that study.
Yeah.
That's how that works.
And you feed them till they look like you.
That's right.
But I mean, he's I met him when he was 3.
Mm-hmm.
So and he was 4 when Misty and I got married. Mm-hmm. And you get that, and you do put yourself, but it's one of those things that you choose because that's how love works. I mean, I agree with the history of Christianity that thinks that love is a choice that you make, so it's I'm going to marry his mother, which means I become his father, period. Mm-hmm. And so I'm going to love him and choose to love him. And then it's not that you don't ever choose, and I'm going to treat him and believe him as if he's my son and believe that he's my son. Not just, I know scientifically he's not, but you do have to actually believe that you're his father in order to be one.
Yeah, but the point,
and that's a choice.
And that's meaningful, and it is a choice. But the point that we want to make here is, you're right. Within Christianity, to love is something you choose to do, whether you have emotions about it or not.
Right.
But people say the same thing about the beliefs that they say about the emotion of love, the feeling of attachment. And you couldn't choose to have that feeling right now about a person that you don't know. But you can choose to put yourself in those situations where that feeling will arise naturally. So did you choose to have that feeling? Yes. Indirect doxastic voluntarism. Yeah. And the same thing happens with beliefs. You put yourself in the classroom where you listen to this guy that you don't agree with, and you choose what to believe. Now someone would say, well, you're just describing cherry picking data. in some cases, but that's not necessarily the case. Maybe I already have a bias against, say, evolution, and you atheists watching think, that's not right. Okay, so what do? I can choose to believe evolution by putting myself in a situation where I'm listening to all your data, I'm listening to your guys, and the belief may or may not arise naturally. And in that way, I chose the belief. So you can choose beliefs is the point. That's just...
And this is one of the things I say that he did negative in the debate. He did give a bunch of YouTube atheist bumper sticker slogans instead of arguments. And that's pretty shallow, and he does need to be called out for that. I mean, I do appreciate him and all that stuff, but that kind of thing is shallow. And these quips, like you can't choose your beliefs, and I don't know, but you don't know either, blah, 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 blah. Those aren't actual arguments. Those are just blowing hot air.
But what I do appreciate about Matt is he's one of the few atheists. Hitchens didn't have this going for him.
Yeah.
He will try to understand what you're saying and to actually respond to what you're saying.
Yeah, he will understand what you're saying. He'll try to do that. But
when you
in
challenge
lieu
him,
of
he'll be like,
giving
well,
a
that's just
positive
assertion.
construction for anything, it's no way. And part of that's because he doesn't think he needs to, but part of it is just, I think, a little bit of intellectual dishonesty and laziness.
I'm not going to say that.
Not intentionally, but because he thinks that his definition gives him that privilege when it doesn't. Mm-hmm. And then, okay, not intellectual dishonesty, cognitive dissonance then.
Okay. Yeah, now that I'm fine with.
But that was just one criticism. I'm not trying to we've already made all of our pleasantries. We like Matt. But what it does is it popularizes this notion that needs to be corrected, that as if you have a view of the world, we call it a worldview, you know? Mm-hmm. If you can't give a positive construction for it or a defense, it's not worth having.
And he might say, yeah, but that's the whole point. I'm skeptical. But you can make a defense that skepticism is the right thing to do, the right position to hold. And he kind of tried to do that. But look, let's get on past the opening statements.
Well, all he did was complain about
he
complained about everything but science, which somehow curiously escapes his radical skepticism.
Yeah.
Because but if you can't even believe that you exist, which he admitted in the cross,
can't have Cartesian certainty about your existence,
right? But you gave him more than he said.
Well, but see now,
now I know that you, but no, he's just like no, he didn't.
Yeah,
he didn't make any decision. But if you can't know that you exist, then you can't know that you're interpreting scientific data properly anyway, because there's no first person
and if your thoughts
perspective
are all determined.
There's no first person perspective to deliberate that information.
Yeah.
Which I mean, the name of his show is ironic because it makes a lot of concessions. The atheist experience presupposes because
consciousness,
first person experience, all this makes a lot of concessions that he's not willing to make in a debate. Right. So,
well, now here. So let's get on past.
Sorry,
this. I could talk about this thing all day.
But he told a questioner, I'm all about atheism. I know what atheism is. I have the atheist experience for 16 years. Blah 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 blah. Yeah, you know how ironically titled that is, given everything you just said in the cross X. Sorry, Matt, but I mean, own a little bit of this and say, sometimes you just, that's.
Okay, but here's the thing. Here's the thing. So
he won't do it.
The reason that I brought up the certainty thing, because I thought I was going to have closing statements. The moderator, Leighton Flowers, forgot the closing statements. So hold on. So the thing is,
there's a lot of things that can be said about that in a bunch of different directions. Most of them funny and at his expense.
But we got to get through this. So I was collecting things.
Well, I had said before the debate that he looked like my grandpa, right, up from the picture. And so I'm just going to chalk this up to old Asian forgetfulness.
Okay, are you done riffing on Leighton so I can talk?
Not even close, but I'll go ahead and.
Okay.
I love Leighton.
You're not done.
I love Leighton Flowers. I can't believe I forgot that. You had one job. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh my gosh. I'm turning into Matt Dillahunty on the atheist experience. I'll hang up on you. So here's the thing. So I think a lot of people go into the cross-examination like they don't prepare for that before the debate. Like what they do is they just write down whatever comes to mind during the thing. I prepared what I wanted to ask him during the cross-ex.
I did not.
You just riffed
felt
on
the way
whatever.
what I got.
So, and it's just two different approaches.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. With the Cross-X, I was collecting things from him that then I could use in my closing statements. And one of those was his lack of certainty. Now, a Cartesian certainty about his own existence. And I'll tell you why. If he had come back around, if he thought I was just trying to say, like, sling mud by doing that, to make him look bad in the eyes of the audience, who doesn't understand it to this depth, I wasn't doing that. What I was trying to do was to say, okay, and I think there's a big problem that everyone who's ever debated him, this is a problem. And somebody needs to call this out. And I was trying to do that, but it got squirrely. You're saying you can't have absolute certainty, but you're telling us we need to give you a demonstration. Okay, yeah, that's right. What is that demonstration? Well, I don't know. I'll know it when I see it. Okay, so here's a bunch of evidence, Matt. Yeah, but that's not a demonstration. Oh, so you want certainty? Nope. Can't have certainty, just want a demonstration. All right, here's a bunch more evidence. Well, that's not a demonstration. Oh, so you really do want certainty.
Yeah.
No, can't have certainty.
Well, he wants
It's
to,
not a shifting of the goalpost. There is no goalpost.
right. And one thing he confused is
Oh, and let me quote you.
Yeah.
Now, he might say, yeah, but that he has said this before. That's not our problem. That's not my fault that you don't have a way to show me. No. We got it backwards. It's not our fault you have the position you have. Your worldview is not going to hold our methodology hostage.
right. You're yeah.
Jonathan Pritchett.
Yeah, you're complaining about a metal detector not detecting sand. Get over it. You know, that's why I think that whole discussion about that, and I know that also came up with Eric's debate. You know, you want the right tool for the right thing. You can't complain about a tool that you want to use for something that doesn't have that purpose, right? Which, again, things have a telos, you know, including science.
Yeah.
And the telos of science is not to investigate these kinds of things. But just because you don't like the metal detector because it's detecting metal and not sand, get over it. And that is actually his problem. But you're right, he has no goalpost. And that itself is actually a losing strategy, and he doesn't realize it. And that's what's...
Now, I got animated there.
Yeah.
And I turned a little bit like Jonathan. It is too.
Here, you want the sign?
I get the prime thing. But
it's not a good strategy.
I'm sorry.
Just saying no, it becomes like a sophist, you know, in the ancient
Well,
Greek
it's
world.
iterative skepticism.
Yeah.
Iterative skepticism, and I know he would deny this, is when no matter what you bring, the person says, yeah, but how do you know? How do you know? How do you know? How do you know?
Yeah.
And you know what J.P. Moreland says you do with an iterative skepticism? Just stop the conversation. Because it's not going anywhere. Because if they don't know, then go home and figure out where you stand on this, and then you'll at least know something.
But what he said was, he says, I want to see the data. I know you think this is evidence. I want to see, but he doesn't understand the difference between data and evidence.
Go for it.
Okay. We talk about this in my resurrection class.
But before you go for it, let me say this. That was in the resurrection. And he said all I did was bring what scholars say. And if you watch the debate video, and it's not out yet, so I hope I'm in the shot, because I'm sitting there nodding my head like, yeah, that's fine. Because not only did I mention some evidence in each point for my resurrection, but I had a mountain of stuff I was ready to present if he had ever touched the resurrection. Why we believe that Jesus died, why we believe that Jesus existed, why we believe that Jesus appeared, why we believe that these people died martyrs' deaths. I had evidence for all that. I can tell you why the scholars say that. Right.
But what he said was, you think that's evidence, I want to look at the data. Well, the reason why it's evidence is because data only becomes evidence in the service of an argument, okay? Because data is just facts. Data is just rocks. You go collect. And what you were right to point out that he wanted something that is in a beaker, you know, like a science thing. That's not what you're doing, because you can't do that because we don't have DeLoreans that hit 88 miles per hour.
Right.
So unless you want to be an infinite skeptic about all of history, and they exist, Holocaust deniers, 9/11, whatever didn't happen. That's all.
And that's what,
you know.
Since we can't have that level of. And I said something to him like, I know you're not saying science, but something kind of science-y. And I think he nodded his head. I haven't seen the video, but I remember it the night it happened. And it really is like, because we don't have that, it's just bird box when it comes to history. Yeah. And that was, you know, there were a few dad jokes in there. I don't think they're dad jokes. There was one dad joke.
No, everyone is universally agreed that you had several dad jokes. The Terminator one was good. But
I was told the bird box one by Dylan Manley, who's anything but a dad joke guy, and he's like, that was my favorite.
You're kidding.
thing.
Dylan Manley is dad joke guy.
But he's like the king of hipsters. But,
but
anyway, so the Bird Box
let's
thing,
give him a little more credit than hipster, because he's actually
he's whatever
he's
is
tolerable.
better than a hipster.
Yeah, he's tolerable. Hipsters are barely.
I'm trying
tolerable.
to just say he's cool.
Yeah, he is.
And he
cool.
would know a cool joke.
Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe.
But anyway, the point is, it's Bird Box when it comes to history.
Right, and see, that's the thing. Okay, so data is like, okay, and it's easy to use an analogy from science. Okay, people think that the fossil record is evidence for evolution.
Yeah.
No, it isn't.
It's data.
It's data. You know what that data tells us? Where dead bones ended up to be found.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't tell us where it lived. Doesn't even tell us where it died. Tells us where those.
To quote Ken Hovind.
Yeah.
Wow, I'm quoting Ken Hovind.
Sorry.
You can't prove that fossil had any kids.
He's actually right. Listen, I mean, I don't care for the guy, but Ken Ham makes the same argument.
Yeah.
And I like the museum, fine. It's answers fine, whatever. They're all whatever.
Yeah.
They're right. I'm not going to take it. You know, people say right things, so let's not consider the source. You know, but it's true. You don't know anything about it. It's just data. What you have to do with that is you have to take that data and shove it into an argument as evidence for something, and it's only as good evidence as the argument is. See, scientists, they actually make arguments because they don't. If you read, they're saying this means that. That's an argument, right. You know. It's not like, oh, this proves that.
Yeah,
no,
it's a probabilistic. It's an inference.
Right.
It's an inductive thing.
It's science gives you likely stories.
Yeah.
And some are more likely than others. And then the history of science is mostly failures, so those stories get jettisoned anyway.
We have polled. We believe that there are 10,000, bears in this particular region. Yeah. And we have studied, and the reason we believe that they are long-haired bears, that all of them are long-haired bears. Why? Because there's 10,000, we've studied 7,000, and they've all been long-haired bears. So while we can't conclusively say so, it seems that's how science does.
Right. So history is events.
Mm-hmm.
Now, events are not repeatable like experiments, but what events do is they leave effects. And so that effects is the data that all those scholars you're quoting from are picking from. It's not, the scholars say. It's no, the scholars are looking at the data and drawing conclusions from the data. Mm-hmm. And universally, just like scientists can come to a consensus, you can come to a consensus looking at the data from the effects of history, whether they're textual, whether they're archaeological finds, that are pottery, whatever else. All of these things that history has left us from these events. That's your data. And then you compress those into service to an argument, and what you had was atheist, Jewish, Christian, whatever. You had a consensus of scholars who say this data is evidence for this, event, or this person's existence, or this occurrence, like the crucifixion or whatever. Period.
Yeah.
The effects of that. That's what makes it. Why it's evidence for an argument, because the argument, everyone's like, yeah, this points to that.
Yeah.
And that's the difference between data and evidence.
That's good.
So
we don't. So let's move on to talking about. We've talked about all this. Let's move on to the cross-ex. Okay.
We've already kind of.
I guess we've kind of talked about all that stuff. So ultimately, in the cross-ex, the free will argument got discussed a lot, and I was able to defend my premises. In the Kalam cosmological argument, it also got discussed, and I didn't realize it at the time, but to multiple people who didn't know each other, they told me afterwards that was a decisive moment in the debate, because he kept acting like we didn't know certain things, and then I'd explain why we know it, and he kept trying to say, yeah, but we're not physicists, and I kept saying, this is not a sciencey point, this is a philosophical point. And then it was I mean,
jump out of a hole with
yourself.
No place to plant your feet. You have no place to plant your feet. It's a bottomless pit. Jump out of it. How do you do that?
Right.
Oh yeah. Well, and then his confusion about, well, I'm not a compatibilist, and of course I didn't move towards free will, so you're a determinist then.
Well, compatibilism is determinism, so yeah.
Right. Well, yeah, but you just said you're not a compatible. You moved away from compatible.
So
we
what
know
are
that
you?
compatible. Yeah.
And finally, he went back and said, "Well, I'm a determinist still." Yeah, okay, well, great. Then why did we just do that song and dance?
Right, but he got
Just say I'm a
clearly
determinist.
he got clearly off his game.
And
there.
so I said, "Hey, look, when I do this right here, was that determined?" And his response is, "Well, I don't." Well, I think he said no, and I'm like, "Wait, what? That's determinism." And he's like, "No." And then it went into the next section, and he's like, "Okay, well, let me dress that up. That would be determinism. But I'm saying I don't have a way to know." And I'm like, "Okay, now this is dodging and weaving. You're a determinist, right, Matt?"
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Okay.
But you don't know if that was determined.
Right, then that was determined. And what that was, we saw someone, and I think, and I could be reading this wrong, but we saw someone trying desperately not to have any burden of proof.
Yeah.
Because if you say, yes, determinism is the case, and yes, that was determined, okay, now you got to defend that. Now
Right.
you share
But the
burden of proof.
alternative, this is where it gets into the cognitive dissonance. The alternative just makes him look like he doesn't know what he's talking about, and that's not a winning strategy because you look like you knew what you were talking about.
Yeah.
Even if let's say he's right about all this, doesn't help his case because he's the guy who's getting rattled and running around at that particular point in the cross-sex. So
Well, I do appreciate that he seemed calm and cool through most of it.
but he did get
There were a
unhinged
couple of
little bit.
places where he got rattled, particularly at poor Drew Beatty,
Yeah.
who I didn't even know, I'd never met and didn't know that was one of our podcast
Yeah,
listeners.
and Drew, you were absolutely right. Every scholarly general reference work says that atheism is the belief that there is no God. But there was a debate.
But I still
I
stand
know,
by
but there
what I
was a
said.
debate where I think it was Blake Genta or somebody cleared that up, and he's like, "Well, we just need to change it."
Yeah.
Why? Because you want to make up words and definite? No, pick another word.
Yeah.
Drew, you're right.
But I don't care. People that haven't heard me say this, I don't care what you call yourself. I care what you mean by it. So if you want to say I'm an alligator, well, what do you mean by alligator? Someone who lacks a belief in God. All right, alligator, let's talk about your worldview.
Right.
You know, that's fine with me because I
Right.
want to have real conversations and see people come to Christ.
Yeah.
But there is an important discussion about labels because that's why we talk past each other a lot of times.
Right.
But he did come unglued during that. But really,
and
the
Drew
thing,
was absolutely right.
the cross-ex and the question and answer time, that was where it just got better and better and better as it went, and I was just having fun, you know?
Yeah.
I enjoyed every last
It's
second.
fun to win, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I'm not saying that I won. I'm not going to speak that way.
Okay.
But, all right, so let's close this thing down. But watch the debate. We'll link it in the show notes. Well, actually, we won't because it's not out yet.
Well, we'll come back and link it.
But yeah. But so if you're an atheist out there and you think I spoke too harshly here, I'm sorry. Contrast that with any episode of the Atheist Experience. And, and so just, check us out.
It's not
hey,
personal.
it would be
it's
really
not personal. It's we like Matt. It's just
yeah,
this
I like
is
Matt.
game-
I like
yeah.
Matt. It would be really helpful if you guys would subscribe, even if you're an atheist, and even if you don't typically listen to our show. Please subscribe.
It's his
because
show. The show's
we're trying.
The channel's Braxton Hunter.
We're trying to make something of ourselves.
And if you're an atheist, you can join our fellow Christians in actually supporting us and becoming a Patreon.
Yes, click right up here
yeah.
somewhere around L. Ron Hubbard, and you can. And if you're listening by audio, you can just
We take atheist money.
Go to patreon.com/TrinityRadio. And thanks again to Matt for the debate and Leighton for help for setting it up for me. And listen, check out our sister podcasts, the Soteriology 101, the Bible Brodown, and Steve Gregg's The Narrow Path. We'll see you next time on Trinity Radio.
This is the last word.
Fidelity and mission. Recently, the General Conference of the United Methodist Church assembled for a long postponed meeting that finally came to a head about what to do with clergy and gay marriage, as far as ordaining clergy who are non-celibate LGBTQ or performing gay marriage ceremonies in their church. This debate has probably raged since the 70s between the moderates and progressives versus the conservatives, with here in the United States, the conservative contingent growing smaller and smaller. However, global Methodism has exploded all over the world, and global Methodists are overwhelmingly conservative. At the meeting where they had finally kicked the can down the road long enough and come to a decision, the Methodist Church has decided that they were going to stick with the traditional plan, which was to continue to not allow LGBT clergy to be ordained and perform gay marriages in their churches, despite years of defiance by their clergy who have gone inconsistently disciplined for breaking the Book of Disciplines. So what this tells me is that with a vote of 800 delegates or so, split 53 to 47% in favor of the traditional plan, a full 30% of those delegates being from the global church rather than the United States, that it was the African church and the Filipino church and other places around the world who came to the United States to stick up for biblical fidelity, for faithfulness to Jesus, and conservative traditional Christian values that have been the position of the church for 2,000 years. We are reminded that for global Christians around the world, the United States is their foreign mission field. And so we want to thank God for global Christians who come here, defend the faith, stick up for biblical principles, and inspire all of us to remain faithful. Without the global church, the United Methodists would have gone the way of other mainline Protestant denominations that ended up splitting, dividing, their church buildings being vacated on Sunday mornings where all but a few remain. And so hopefully, even though there may be an inevitable split of the United Methodist Church, the faithful churches who stuck with the traditional plan will continue to thrive and as they move forward, being faithful Christians. So once again, thank you to the global Christian Methodists who came over here and reminded us to stay faithful to Jesus, to stay faithful to God's Word. Thank you.
If you would like more content, click here and keep watching Bible studies. Click up here. And finally, we want you to subscribe. We need more subscribers, so click here.